Have you ever moved to the cloud expecting to save a fortune, only to find your budget has mysteriously vanished into thin air? If that sounds familiar, you are so not alone. So let's dive in and uncover some of those hidden costs that seem to trip up even the most careful planners.
All right, just a quick heads up. What we're about to get into is actually part 4 of a 5-part series. It's all based on this really in-depth research report by Virtualization Options LLC. Now, obviously, we can only scratch the surface here, but the full report, it's packed with a ton more detail.
Okay, so this really brings us to the big question, right? Why do cloud budgets so often spiral completely out of control? I mean, they're supposed to give us more control, not less. Let's get into it.
I mean, we all know the promise, right? The big selling point of the cloud was pay only for what you use. So simple, so elegant. But then there's the reality. And for a lot of folks, that reality is a bunch of surprise fees and budgets that are just totally blown. It's that huge gap between the promise and what actually happens that we're going to unpack right now.
All right, so first things first, let's decode that cloud bill. Because if you really want to understand where your money is going, you've got to look way beyond the obvious line items. The real story, well, it's always in the details, isn't it?
You know, your bill is usually built around a few main things. You've got your compute costs. That's for your processing power. Then there's storage for, well, storing all your data. Network costs for moving it around. And then what they call ancillary services. Think of those as the extras, you know, the managed databases or fancy monitoring tools that make life easier, but they've got their own price tag. These are the things you expect to see, the ones you plan for.
But here's where it gets interesting. It's that other layer of costs, the stuff you might not see coming. We're talking about things like premium support plans, which, by the way, can easily tack on an extra 3 to 10% to your total bill. And when you start adding in other premium features, or even charges for something as simple as API calls, wow. These hidden costs can just quietly bleed your budget dry month after month.
Okay, and that brings us to what is, for many, the single biggest shocker on a cloud bill. I love this term, the data egress trap. It's the absolutely mind-boggling cost of, wait for it, getting your own data out of the cloud.
Right, so here's the deal, and it's so important to get this. Moving your data into the cloud, totally free. Of course it is. They want your business. But the second you want to move it out, that, my friends, is data egress. And that's where they get you. It is literally a one-way toll booth.
And look, the cost can be pretty steep. We're talking a typical rate of around 12 cents per gigabyte. Now I know what you're thinking. 12 cents? Who cares? But you're not moving gigabytes, you're moving terabytes, maybe even petabytes of data. That 12 cents suddenly explodes into tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's crazy.
And this problem gets even worse in some very common situations. If you're running a multi-cloud or a hybrid setup where data is constantly moving back and forth, oof, those egress fees are just brutal. And hey, what if you're a media company or anyone delivering content like videos or high-res images directly to your users? Get this, sometimes those egress fees can cost you more than all your other compute costs combined.
Okay, but it's not all doom and gloom. The good news is you can absolutely fight back. For starters, use content delivery networks, or CDNs. They keep your data physically closer to your users, which cuts down on those long-haul transfers. Also, think about data locality. Basically, keep your apps and the data they need in the same cloud region. That stops a ton of unnecessary internal transfers. And honestly, even simple stuff like just compressing your data before you send it can make a huge difference.
All right, so egress fees are a big piece of the puzzle, for sure. But they're just one piece. We also have to talk about the cost of the move itself. I'm talking about the huge, one-time migration costs that are just so easy to forget about when you're in that initial planning phase.
Yeah, just take a look at this breakdown from the report. You've got all the stuff you'd expect, right? Professional services, new tools, training for your team. But look at that big one, dual environment costs. This is huge. For a while during the transition, you're paying for your old on-prem system and your shiny new cloud environment at the same time. That overlap alone can eat up like 30% of your entire migration budget. It's a killer.
And because of all these potential gotchas, the report has one really key recommendation. And that's this. You absolutely must build a contingency fund into your budget. We're talking 20 to 30%. Seriously. Think of it as your financial safety net. It's the buffer you need for when, not if, but when, things take longer or cost more than you planned.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems. Let's pivot to the solution. Let's talk about the playbook, the strategy that actually lets you take back control of all this cloud spending. The modern way to tackle this is something called FinOps.
That stands for financial operations. And it's so much more than just a tool or a piece of software. It's really a cultural shift. It's all about getting your finance people, your tech people, and your business leaders all in the same room, speaking the same language, and making smart, collaborative decisions about how to spend money in the cloud.
And when you do this, the results are pretty amazing. We're seeing organizations that really nail FinOps getting more than just control. They're seeing actual cost reductions of 20 to 30% on average. And the really important part is, they're not doing it by just slashing budgets and killing projects. They're doing it by spending smarter and just getting rid of the waste.
And that really brings us to maybe the most important takeaway of all, which is captured perfectly in this quote from the report. The whole goal here, the point of FinOps, of managing your cloud costs, it's not just about cutting costs for the sake of cutting costs. It's about optimizing your spending so that every single dollar you put into the cloud is actually helping the business grow and innovate, not holding it back.
So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. When it comes to your organization's cloud costs, are you the one managing them, or are they managing you? I mean, are you really in control, making proactive, strategic choices, or are you just reacting when that massive bill shows up at the end of the month? Seriously, the answer to that question, it could change everything.